Shalom, welcome to our Patreon Friday talk with the Baal Shem Tov. This Shabbat, we're going to look at some practices of the Baal Shem Tov and some customs, and we're going to examine a little bit of a very fascinating idea, what it means to be called a Baal Shem Tov, a master of a good name. Sounds like a nice title. You know, the world is full of titles, but I think to understand this title is to understand something of the secrets of heaven and earth. Master of the good name is not a title that one can achieve, rather it has to be given to you by other people, like many titles. Obviously, the implication of the word master, Baal, is that he's in control of something. A master is in control of his wisdom, or his knowledge, or his speech, or his household, or his bank account. There's many types of mastery involved. What does it mean to be a master of the good name? Well, the good name, of course, usually in Kabbalah will refer to the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, God's eternal name, the name that Orthodox Jews don't say out loud. Many other people seem to think it's okay to say that name. I haven't done a survey of what happens in their lives, but I know religious people that have used that name, and they've been hurt severely for doing so. Now, why is it that someone who would call on God's name would be hurt? Is not because God is mean and vengeful and jealous, like the old-time religion wants to teach us, but rather it is because they're calling on forces that their own vessels cannot handle. When you call on God's name, you are calling power to yourself. And if your vessel cannot handle it, your vessel will break. And if your vessel breaks, there's many ways to see the manifestation of that. Usually it comes out in the form of various levels of insanity. It can be cycling of thoughts, it can be repetition of speech, it can be inability to remember from moment to moment, it can be seen in grandiose thinking where a person gives himself powers that he does not really have. All of these are part of calling into power that a person cannot handle. What's called in the nomenclature of Kabbalah, ribui, or too much light. So this is why we have to have teachers, because our teachers can help us know when we're getting a little too out of line, a little too much light. And then again, our students, the people that you give over your Torah to, will also help you discover where we've said too much, too soon, too fast. Giving over too much. So when you call on one of God's names, you're calling on a power. And if your vessel can't handle the power, that brings extreme judgment. Because in heaven, they're looking down and saying, well, who is this guy to call on my name? It's just like, La Havdil. Think about it for a second. If you're the president of a country and, the phone rings, and your secretary answers the phone and says, she covers the phone and she says, it's the pizza guy delivering the pizza. Like, who is this guy to get the number of the president? Why is he calling me? How did he do this? This is not the way things work. There is a protocol. And in the world of holiness, the protocol, of course, is the levels of the olamot themselves. The partitions of the mind, and each partition of light has its partition of darkness. So those things have to be clarified before a person can just call God and ask for a pizza. La Havdil. I think you get the idea, though. So calling on the good name, being the master of the good name, it implies a tremendous amount of preparation and holiness and strength and endurance and perseverance before someone can do that. Okay, So let's say we're smart enough not to try to call on God's name and say the words Yud K, the letters Yud K Vav K out loud. I mean, I see people say this all the time online. They say it in old-time movies. Some people say it when they knock on your door. But God judges people to the side of mercy, and He understands that people that don't know the restrictions, He's gentler, shall we say. But a person who's osek in Kabbalah has to be very careful, because he's already a member of the court, if you will. Learning Kabbalah, Rabbi Nachman says, is like being given keys to the treasure house of the king. He gives you the keys so that you can go in the treasure house and gaze upon the wonders of the king. But He doesn't give you the keys to the treasure house so that you can just take what you want and do what you want. You're in the king's palace. It's not your palace. So the secrets of the Torah are like that. They are the king's treasures. He'll let us gaze. He'll let us look in awe. But if we think we're just going to put something in our pocket and take it outside and take it home and use it on something, then we're really in trouble. So a master also means master of knowledge of where I'm holding. Who am I? Who am I not? Okay. Now there's another angle, another take we can do on this, which is very interesting. And this is the idea of what is a name itself. A name is a group of letters with a phonetic correspondence of sound. Of course, there's meanings, and there's manifold meanings in God's names. An interconnection because of the letters and what they represent and their structure and their form, the vowels of the name. It's really a very broad ocean of information. However, the idea of a name in its simplest sense is the idea of reputation. We've said this before, and we'll have to repeat it. Reputation. You are a person, you have a reputation. Where is your reputation? Well, chiefly it's in other people's minds. And then, of course, there's the reputation you have in your own mind of yourself, which is very interesting. You know, as they say in Hebrew, "Atachai b'seret shelcha." That literally means you live in your own movie, which is a fantasy, generally. There's a little truth that slips in there, but so you get the idea. Of course, it's usually that phrase is used in a sarcastic mode amongst teenagers. Tachai b'seret. You hear it all the time, but it's a very deep thing that they're saying. Tachai b'seret means you're living in an idea that doesn't necessarily exist at all. And how dangerous is that? And how much more dangerous is if I live in a movie about my reputation that's not true. So being a Baal Shem Tov means you have to have absolute understanding and mastery of this idea of reputation. But here it's the reputation of God. So when you take on the reputation of God, you're taking on something very big and very powerful and very serious. You know, you want to be a bodyguard for the president? You want to be the chief advisor? Do you know how much trust there has to be in you to be the chief advisor? Do you know how much trust it takes to carry the reputation of your king into the world? That's one of the secret reasons why Jews grow beards and wear kippot and wear special clothes and wear tzitzit, of course. Because I'm electing to take on the reputation of the king. Now, that's a serious thing. And it has very high rewards, but with those rewards come the potential for very difficult consequences. So to return to our original idea, the master of the good name means that a person is taking on that idea of responsibility for the reputation of the king, the good name. Because God is good. But when someone looks like a religious person and does something not good, it's really a problem. Because I've already taken on the idea of the good name, and now I'm making the good name not look so good. So people say, whoa, wait, Avraham, that's enough for me. I don't need that in my life. This is hard enough. They might be right for them at that time and place in their life. But there are times and places in life where we don't have a choice. And the beauty, of course, is to take on the responsibility from our choice. Not because we're forced to. Not because I'm desperate. Not because I'm facing death and old age. So we want to come to Hashem with love and awe, and not with fear of consequences and punishment and what's going to be with my soul. Maybe I better pay somebody now to take care of me spiritually in the world to come. Well, it doesn't work quite that way. We've got to do some work here. But with all of that said, we go back. Who is the Baal Shem Tov? He was this man who learned the secrets of the Torah from a secret society in Middle Europe in the early 1700s. And because of his purity and his dedication and his soul, God said, you're my guy. I'm going to let you represent me, and I'm going to give you the power to do it. And I'm going to give you the Torah to do it. And I'm going to protect you. And I'm going to do miracles for you because I can trust you to carry my name. Now, Rabbi Nachman says when you delve deeply into the secrets of the Torah, you are also given powers. You are given powers of prayer, powers to enable barren women to have children, powers of creating new insights in Torah that were never spoken before in history. Now, to some people, that might not seem like such a big deal. Okay, you had a new idea in Torah. It's a Torah I heard from the Baal Shem Tov, and then I turned it around this way or that way. Well, we don't understand that when you make a new insight into Torah, you're carving a pathway in darkness. You're expanding the Torah She'Ba'al Peh, the oral tradition that started with Moses. You're joining the river of eternity. And it's not based on fame and foreknowledge. It's based on carving a pathway of knowledge in the minds of this world. Even if only one person hears your new insight. So all of this is bound up with the learning of the secrets of the king, the treasure of his palace. It's a serious business, really. So, because it's such a serious business, we need to learn to smile and laugh a little bit to offset the seriousness. So that's a little introduction about this idea, the Baal Shem Tov, what it means. There's obviously a lot more to say, but I hope that gives us some insight why we're still learning his teachings 300, years later. Okay, so some of the insights of the Baal Shem Tov that connect to Shabbat, because here we are, Erev Shabbat. And Erev Shabbat is a wonderful time. It's a time of hard work and preparation for the holy day, but it's also a time to begin to receive something higher, to begin to make the shift, the transition. And that itself, that transition is very pleasant, I find, because, we're dropping some of the worries of the week. When you don't have to answer your phone, then you don't have to worry about who's calling you. And when you don't have to check the news, you don't have to really worry about what's happening in the world because we have a creator who's worried about what's happening in the world. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we don't pray for things for the world on Shabbat. But you see, it's the idea of dropping these concerns that are external to the chief concerns of life, which are the spiritual concerns. So the Baal Shem Tov, we begin with an idea about the prayer of Musaf on Shabbat, and this is important for everybody to hear, especially a person who prays. But Tfilat Musaf, Tikanta Shabbat, right, we say, Ra'iti Katu B'Shem HaKadosh Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, Ki lekach netaken derech tashrak, that at this time, we're repairing the reverse order of the letters. In other words, the Aleph Bet, this is also a very mystical idea. The Aleph Bet can be read in two orders, Aleph Bet, Gimel Daled, and it can also be read backwards, Taf, Shin, Reish, Kuf, Tashrak. Now what that represents is the expression of light into the world and the return of the light back. That there is this positive light that starts at a very high holy place and it goes downward. And then there's the idea of the light that's farthest from the Aleph, the Taf, returning towards the Aleph. That's why Cain was given a Taf on his forehead, which is Gematria 400. That's why Avraham Avinu had to pay 400 shekels kesef, silver, for the Marata Machpelah, because Ephron Achiti was charging a number, 400 of din. It's the lowest level in the ladder of Kedusha. And that's why Esav showed up to greet Jacob when he returned to Eretz Yisrael with 400 men. The number 400 is always a signifier of din, of judgment, of justice. Not justice like we're thinking in terms of right and wrong, but rather the power of constriction. So during the week, we are in this power of constriction mode. Taf Shin Reish Kuf. We're building vessels all week long, and chiefly through our good deeds, through the Torah that we learn, and through our prayer. Guess what? The elevator isn't always open. And all the holy things that we try to do during the week don't necessarily get out of the atmosphere. You know, it's like one of those spaceships that don't quite clear, the gravity of this world. Okay. Because in the weekday, everything's in garments of the light. We're still in Chol, technically, although Shabbat is coming, but you see this tefillin here, this is just a garment. It's a package to hold something higher. But on Shabbat, we don't need tefillin because we don't need the package. The light's already there in your brain, with all the other things, of course, accomplished. Va'al derech mashal ot, he tells us a very interesting thing here. The letter Aleph, mitlabesh ba'ot vav b'gimel v'chulei. Each letter is very interesting. The Aleph, its garment is the Bet. And then the garment of that is the Gimel. And the garment of that is the Dal. You see, each letter is hiding inside the next letter. Isn't that interesting? The idea of one energy hiding inside another, inside of another, inside of another. All the way to the Taf. And it's like, think of all these letters of the Aleph Bet as inner energies that are coalescing into one. And then guess what? On Shabbat, boom, all the letters are one, bound in this ultimate unity. And he says, B'Shabbat hu devekut elyon. Shabbat is this upper unification with Hashem, bli hefsek, without any pause. Omrim b'tashrak derech pshitut b'livushim ad kan divrei kadsho, and that's the end of what he tells us. So obviously there's a lot more that can be said about this. But just this idea that all the letters are also all the prayers of the week. And these prayers of the week are not necessarily breaking through the psychic atmosphere to get into the mind and heart of God. But on Shabbat there's this extra booster of power to take everything up. So with that understood, how much more do we want to pray with all our hope and power and love and awe on Shabbat. And that's oftentimes why we do, because all that energy that we've been developing during the week in Avodat Hashem is now being lifted. The escalator is on, and it's being taken back up to Hashem. So that in itself is a gift from the Baal Shem Tov, to understand this structure, that through the Aleph Bet we see this diversity that becomes a unity, that becomes a critical mass of spiritual power that's lifted to heaven. Think, how could we ever live without Shabbat? You know, all our spiritual efforts would be hanging around in the trees, you know? But it really needs to go to heaven. Why does it need to go to heaven? Because when our spiritual effort arrives in heaven, it's like a big deal. God has just gotten a telegram from his long-lost son, his beloved child. He misses us. And we sent him a prayer. We sent him a message of love and awe and praise. God wants that. He's like, wow, they're talking to me. They care. They're connected to me. I want to hear from them. Anybody who has children knows about this. You know, I'm always asking myself, you know, I want to call my parents. Well, do they want to call me? Well, I think they're waiting for me to call them. That's why it's a command, kibud av v'em. The mitzvah is on the children to call the parents, not on the parents to call the children. It's a chesed, it's a kindness when the parents call the children. But for those of us, God willing, who still have parents that we can call on the physical realm, Erev Shabbat is a wonderful time to do so. Even just to say 3 words, I've been thinking of you. Actually, that's 5 words, sorry. But I think any parent would love just to hear those words. Because children don't understand what it's like to be a parent until they themselves are parents. And so they're still looking at, they're a result of something else. But when you become a parent, you're the cause. And so you're much more attached to that which you bring into the world than that which brought you into the world. Okay. So that's a wonderful thing, Erev Shabbat, is to gather in that spiritual power of the week and prepare for Shabbat, to prepare spiritually to actually do some of the kavanot and the mitzvot, and to pray to Hashem to keep the Shabbat, to talk to Hashem about the Shabbat. Hashem, help me keep the Shabbat. Help me get to the minyan on time. Help me go to the mikveh. Help me have the proper thoughts all day long. Help me not get obsessed with fixing the fence and the dryer and the washing machine, you know. Help me leave this physical world a little bit. A break already. And he helps. He does help. Always. When you ask for spiritual things, God helps immediately. When we ask for physical things, I need a new couch, God. The ants are taking over the couch. My kids have a couch that they put in the front porch, and all of a sudden there's a beehive in the couch. I say, well, pretty soon you'll have honey. But, you know, it's not really a good place to sit anymore. So, you know, we want to leave this physical world a little bit, and that's Shabbat. Okay. Now, b'chol tefillah yesh birur nitzotzim chadashim. Every prayer we're releasing and elevating and clarifying new sparks. What are those sparks? You hear this word spark all the time in Kabbalah. It's actually little capsules of desire for God that get put into garments. The desire for a cup of milk is a spark of desire for God put into the garment called cup of milk. Okay? The desire for money is the desire for God put into the vessel called money. And so on and so forth. Every single desire that we have is actually a fallen desire of the desire for God. If we can just drill that into our hearts and minds, It's going to change the way we see the world. And it's going to give us a tremendous amount of compassion, hopefully for ourselves and others. Because the world is lost. They're trapped in those garments. I need all these things. Everybody needs a cup of milk once in a while, and they need to pay their bills, and they need to go on vacation. God knows these things. But He wants us to know that inside those desires is the true desire for Him. And prayer is the chief way that we strip those garments off and we reveal the pure desire. The pure desire, just to want Hashem. Okay, so those sparks are being clarified through every prayer. And listen to the Chiddush the Baal Shem Tov brings us on this. Rak Shabbat yarichenu haKohen lifnei Hashem. The pasuk says in the Torah, only on Shabbat the Kohen goes in and replaces the showbread. He prepares the new 12 loaves. He takes out the old loaves of the previous week. They're still warm and fresh, and maybe you could put some butter on them, I don't know, but they're taken out, and the Kohanim can't wait to eat that bread. It's still fresh after a week. There's no freezer over there either. No toaster. And the Kohen brings in the yarichenu. He prepares the new showbreads. This, the Baal Shem Tov is teaching us, this is the teaching of bringing the sparks of the weekday into the mikdash of the heart and of the mind, and bringing them to it as a new offering to Hashem. So the Kohen prepares the new bread, the new sparks that have been gathered through the avoda to create that bread, the 10 stages of avoda of making bread, the 7 days of the week of gathering in the grain and everything that's done to make those breads. He brings them now and puts them on the bread, the golden altar of the bread in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Kodesh, before the Kodesh Kodeshim. This is the idea of bringing our prayers before Hashem. And bread is just a symbol of that. So another idea. This is the way a lot of the Baal Shem Tov Sfarim appear. He gives us little idea after idea. It's not these big, long drashot that Rabbi Nachman gave us or that other great rabbis gave us, but just little paragraphs, because that's how they were gathered. And oftentimes that's the nature of the holiness, is that new ideas are coming all the time into the mind of a tzaddik. And he can't necessarily sit down and write a whole book. He just writes them down, next. The Arizal said, there's so many ideas in my mind coming out that I can't even say them to you. They're too fast to be brought into speech even. The students said that they put their ear to the Arizal when he was sleeping. And while he was sleeping, they could hear him speaking words of Torah. Do you know what that is? That's Torah straight from heaven, because the Arizal's asleep. But his mouth is still speaking Torah, because his soul is still connected to the world of Torah above. So just to give us some proportion about this idea. And if you get one new idea of Torah in a week, in a month, in a lifetime, it's still valuable and important and worth writing down. And many times you'll get a new idea and then you'll see, oh, this was written about in the Tosfot 900 years ago. That's okay. For you, it's a new idea. For you, it's a new spark of holiness. And the fact that the Rebbe Yitzhak of the Tosfot, the grandsons of Rashi, wrote it down, okay. That means it entered the spiritual atmosphere then. And it's spreading out to us. And that's fine. And sometimes you'll have a real new idea that no one has ever said. We don't know. That's not our business. It's God's job to create the library in heaven. Okay. Another idea On Shabbat at Musaf, we elevate, listen closely, when we say the word Keter at Musaf on Shabbat, what's happening? We're elevating the world of speech to the world of Keter. Keter is pre-linguistic reality. There is no language formation in the Keter. It's above your head. It's transcendent consciousness. Once something is in words, it's already not transcendent. It's locked in the forms of the ideas of the words. Letters create words create ideas, ideas create sentences, which are broader ideas, or could be more specific. But the point is that at this time on the Shabbat davening, there is this place of silence. Katar li me'at. Katar li means to wait in Aramaic. Wait to speak. Hold on to your silence. It is a gift. It is a gift to be in pure silence. And in the noisy world we live in, I don't think I have to say too much about that. And the Rav goes on to tell us that at this level of silence, we don't even have the distinction between the different parts of our soul, between feelings and thoughts and ideas, between the sensations of the body. All that is absorbed into the silence, into that pure place of utter awareness, unspecified. So we should all be blessed with a little bit of that silence on Shabbat as well. To be blessed to just remove the urge to speak. Ay, ay, ay. I remember so many times going to yeshiva and sitting in shiurim with wonderful rabbis, and I just burning to talk, burning up. It took a while to understand that whatever I had to say wasn't as important as being quiet. And whatever I wanted to ask and felt I needed to know was still not as important as learning silence. So Friday is a beautiful day to prepare for silence, because the world is kind of like the landing gear. The world is gently coming down to land into Shabbat. So I want to bless all of you with that sense of peace, of silence, inner silence, the removal of that inner voice for a little while. The peace to just listen. Listen to the wind. Listen to the creatures around you. And perhaps you'll hear something from a much higher place. One more idea that just popped into my head that I want to share. We have this phrase, Midbar Har. The Baal Shem Tov says that the Jewish people came to the Midbar Har, of course, the mountain in the desert. Which is usually Har Sinai, the place of the giving of the Torah. But Midbar Har, the Baal Shem Tov says, is Midaber Har, the mountain of speech. Now, who is the mountain of speech? Hashem. God is a mountain of speech. But who is more quiet than a mountain? Now, there are volcanoes. Gotta be careful. But it's useful to think of God as this mountain of speech. And, we're learning Torah. We're trying to chip off a little rock here, trying to incorporate a little bit into our minds. Yanuchu b'min barhar. They rested at the mountain of speech. The Shabbat should be a blessed time of rest and holy speech. And we'll look for you next week on Patreon and all the other platforms. And Shabbat is often a time for getting new ideas in Torah, but we're not allowed to write them down. But Motzi Shabbat is a wonderful time to sit down at your desk, close the door, and just write down whatever ideas came to you. Might make a book, never know. All the best to all of you. And we will see you next week. God bless. Shabbat Shalom.